Kravik spent 3 days inside the human database. The old scientist barely moved from his workstation, his eyes absorbing information that grew more disturbing with each passing hour. Other Vralith scientists came and went, reading over his shoulder, their tendrils quivering with shock. The database contained everything: cultural records, historical documents, entertainment media, scientific journals, medical texts, military archives. The humans had packed their ship with a complete picture of their civilization, intended for the colony they would never reach. What the Vralith found was a nightmare. Kravik compiled his report with trembling appendages. He presented it to Kixalara and the senior research staff in a secure conference room. The lights dimmed as he activated the holographic display. Earth, he began, showing an image of the blue planet, designated by humans as a garden world. By our standards, it is a nightmare of catastrophic proportions. The display changed, showing Earth's weather patterns. Observe. Atmospheric disturbances called hurricanes generate wind speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour. These storms are so large they can be seen from space, and they occur regularly. Tornadoes form with no warning, creating focused vortices that destroy everything in their path. The temperature ranges from -60 to +60 degrees Celsius in different regions. Humans live in all of these regions. Velthon made a gesture of disbelief. Impossible. No species could adapt to such extremes. Yet they do, Kravik continued. But the weather is merely the beginning. The planet's crust is unstable. Tectonic plates shift constantly. Earthquakes are common. Volcanic eruptions occur on average once per day somewhere on the planet. Tsunamis can generate waves 30 meters high. The humans built their cities knowing these disasters would come. They developed prediction methods, warning systems, and survival protocols. They accept planetary violence as normal. The display showed footage from human history: cities destroyed by earthquakes rebuilt, populations displaced by floods returning, volcanic eruptions burying entire settlements with survivors simply moving and starting over. Kixalara felt her internal temperature drop. They rebuild? After such devastation, they return to the same locations? Consistently, Kravik confirmed. But the planet itself is only part of the horror. Observe the biological hazards. New images appeared. Microscopic organisms magnified thousands of times. Earth is covered in microorganisms. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi. Many are harmless. Many are not. These organisms have killed billions of humans throughout their history. Plagues swept across continents, destroying civilizations. In one instance, a single virus killed 50 million humans in just 2 years. Why did they not flee their world? Asked another scientist. They had no means to do so until recently, Kravik explained. But more importantly, they did not want to flee. They fought back. They developed medicine, vaccines, antibiotics. They turned their own biology into a weapon against the diseases. Their immune systems are extraordinarily complex, constantly adapting to new threats. A human can survive infections that would kill most species in the galaxy within hours. The presentation continued. Images of Earth's predators appeared: lions, tigers, bears, crocodiles, sharks, snakes. Creatures with fangs, claws, venom, crushing jaws. These animals evolved alongside humans. Humans were prey, but humans learned to hunt the hunters. They developed tools, weapons, strategies. They turned the tables on every predator their world produced. Kixalara leaned closer to the display. And their own species? How do they interact? Kravik's tendrils drooped. This is perhaps the most disturbing aspect. Human history is defined by conflict. They were constantly against nature, against disease, against predators, and most frequently, against each other. The display showed human wars, ancient battles with primitive weapons, modern conflicts with technology that rivaled some spacefaring species, nuclear explosions that could vaporize entire cities, chemical weapons designed to cause maximum suffering, biological warfare using engineered diseases. They have nearly destroyed themselves multiple times, Kravik continued. Yet they persist. They learn from each conflict. They develop rules, ethics, laws trying to prevent the worst atrocities. But the capacity for violence remains. Every human is capable of it. Every human is taught some form of combat or self-defense. It is part of their culture. Velthon made a sound of distress. These creatures should have destroyed themselves long ago. How do they maintain civilization? Cooperation, Kravik answered. Paradoxically, humans are also highly social. They form bonds, families, tribes, nations. They will sacrifice themselves for each other. They have complex emotions, love, loyalty, compassion. They care for their sick, their elderly, their young with dedication that seems wasteful by logical standards. Yet this same species that shows such tenderness can switch to ruthless efficiency when threatened. The presentation reached its most disturbing section. Now observe what they do for entertainment. The display showed images from human horror media. Movies depicting monsters, killers, supernatural threats, apocalyptic scenarios, psychological terror, books describing fear in vivid detail. Games where players deliberately put themselves in frightening situations. They create fear, Kravik said slowly, artificially. For enjoyment, they pay currency to experience terror in safe environments. There are entire industries devoted to this. They call it horror, and it is one of their most popular forms of entertainment. The room fell silent. Every scientist present struggled to comprehend this information. Why? Kixlera finally asked.
Why would any species seek out fear?
I have studied their psychological research, Kravix replied. Humans use fear as a tool. Experiencing it in controlled situations helps them prepare for real danger. It is training. They desensitize themselves to terror, so that when genuine threats appear, they can think clearly instead of panicking. Fear for humans is not something that controls them. It is something they control. The implications settled over the room like a heavy weight. These humans, sitting in their cells showing no fear despite their captivity. It was not because they were too primitive to understand their situation. It was because their entire species had been trained by the harshest teacher in the galaxy. A death world that tried to kill them every single day for hundreds of thousands of years. Kravix concluded his presentation. I recommend we classify humans as a level 9 hazard species. Not because of their technology, which is inferior to ours. Not because of their physical strength, which is average. But because of their psychology. They cannot be broken through fear, pain, or despair. These are tools they have learned to overcome. Any attempt to subjugate them through traditional methods will fail. Meanwhile, in the holding cells, the humans had made significant progress in their own research. Hyun-Woo had discovered that the energy barriers had a cycle. Every 43 minutes there was a microsecond fluctuation when the fields reset. During that instant, the barrier was vulnerable. He had tested it by throwing small pieces of fabric at precisely timed intervals. Most burned away, but one had passed through. Yoonji had mapped the entire guard rotation schedule. 20 guards total, working in shifts of 4. Each guard carried a weapon that fired some kind of stunning energy. They never entered cells alone, always in pairs, but there was a gap during shift changes. Exactly 8 minutes when only 2 guards were on duty in their entire section. Jisoo had learned about Vralith physiology by observing them carefully. They moved slowly because their muscle fibers were different from human muscles, optimized for efficiency rather than speed. Their bones looked fragile, possibly hollow. Their eyes reacted poorly to sudden bright light. They seemed to have respiratory systems sensitive to certain particles. They were, in almost every physical way, delicate compared to humans. Minho had been the most productive. The fungal sample he had collected was remarkable. He had hidden it in a corner of his cell where moisture accumulated. It grew quickly, feeding on whatever nutrients it could find. He observed its growth cycle, its spore production, its response to light and temperature, and he noticed something crucial. When he moved his hand near the fungus and then near the food slot where guards delivered meals, the guards would step back and make gestures of discomfort. The spores affected them. Not humans, but the Vralith. Doyen coordinated everything through their signal system. He watched his crew work with pride. They had not given in to despair. They had not wasted time feeling sorry for themselves. They had done what humans always did, adapted, learned, and prepared. On the 5th day of their captivity, Kixlera received approval from command to present her findings. She stood before a council of high-ranking Vralith officials, broadcasting from the eternal judgment to the council chambers on their homeworld. She explained everything. The experiments that failed, the human database revealing Earth's true nature, the threat assessment from their most experienced scientists. She concluded with a simple recommendation. Release the humans immediately. Do not make them enemies. They are a death world species and we are not equipped to handle them. The council members debated. Some agreed. Others argued that releasing the humans would show weakness. The Vralith Empire had never released specimens before. The plan began with Jisoo pretending to be sick. She lay on the floor of her cell, curled into a ball, making sounds of distress. The guards noticed immediately. Any specimen death would mean lost data, lost opportunities, lost resources. They could not allow it. 2 guards approached her cell. Standard protocol, never alone. They carried medical scanning devices and their stunning weapons. One pressed a control panel to lower the energy barrier partially, creating an opening large enough for them to reach through. Jisoo moved faster than they thought possible. Her hand shot out, grabbing the wrist of the nearest guard. She pulled hard. The guard stumbled forward, off balance. Jisoo's other hand struck precisely at the guard's elbow joint. The stunning weapon fell from nerveless fingers. The second guard raised its weapon, but Jisoo had already grabbed the device from the first guard. She rolled, aimed, and fired in one smooth motion. The stunning beam hit the second guard in the center mass. It collapsed. The entire sequence took 3 seconds. Hyun-woo had been counting in his cell. 43 minutes since the last barrier fluctuation. 42. 41. He watched Jisoo's movements through the transparent wall, timing his own actions perfectly. When she grabbed the weapon, he threw the metal piece he had extracted from his uniform fastener. It passed through his barrier during the microsecond reset, struck the control panel outside his cell and shorted it. The barrier flickered and died. Hyun-woo was out before it could reset. He picked up the second stunning weapon. The unconscious guard had a device on its belt, some kind of communicator or control unit. Hyun-woo grabbed it, hoping it might open other cells. Yoonji watched the guards in the corridor. She had memorized their patterns perfectly. Right now, 2 guards were at the far end, making their rounds. Shift change was in 4 minutes. The gap was opening. She pressed herself against her cell wall, ready. Hyun-woo found the right control. Cell barriers began dropping one by one. Doyeon emerged first, moving quickly to help coordinate. Minho came out clutching something in his hands. The fungus he had been growing, now wrapped in fabric torn from his uniform. Yoonji stepped out last, her eyes already mapping their escape route. More guards appeared, alerted by automated systems when the cells opened. They moved in formation, weapons raised. But they moved slowly, carefully, the way species did when they had never truly known danger. Doyeon raised his hands. "We do not want violence. Let us leave peacefully." The guards did not understand his words yet. The translation devices were in the testing chambers. They saw his gesture as surrender and moved forward to restrain him. That was their mistake. Doyeon dropped low, sweeping the legs of the nearest guard. Yoonji disarmed another with a precise strike to its weapon hand. Hyun-woo used the stunning weapon, firing at the remaining guards. Jisoo moved like water, flowing around attacks that were too slow to touch her, striking pressure points she had identified during her observations. The humans did not fight with anger or hatred. They fought with calm efficiency. Each movement served a purpose. No wasted energy. No unnecessary violence. They disabled the guards quickly and moved on, leaving the aliens unconscious but alive. Minho opened his bundle of fungus and scattered spores in the air as they moved. The next group of guards that approached began to cough and wheeze. Their eyes watered. Their breathing became labored. They fell back, unable to pursue effectively. The humans moved through the ship using the route Yoonji had memorized. They encountered more guards. Each time, the result was the same. The Vralith were not warriors. They had conquered through technology and fear. They had never faced an enemy that did not break under pressure. In the command center, Kixelara watched the chaos unfold on her monitors. She saw humans moving through her ship like ghosts, unstoppable despite having no weapons, no armor, no understanding of the ship's layout. They simply adapted, learned, overcame. She activated the internal defense systems, force fields activated in corridors trying to trap the humans. The humans found ways around them or waited patiently for the power fluctuations Hyun-woo had told them to expect. Security drones deployed, floating machines with stunning weapons. Minho's spores clogged their air intakes. Yoonji threw pieces of metal to confuse their sensors. More guards arrived, these wearing protective breathing equipment. Doyeon tried communication again, speaking clearly toward any surveillance device. "We do not wish to harm you. We only want our freedom. Stop attacking and we will stop defending ourselves." But the guards had their orders. They advanced, and the humans, reluctantly, did what they had to do. Jisoo felt sick as she struck down another guard. She was a healer. Her training was to save lives, not end them. But she was also human, and humans survived. She pulled her punches, aimed for unconsciousness rather than death. But each strike reinforced what she knew. The Vrelith were terrifyingly fragile. The humans reached a sealed door leading to the docking bay. This was their goal, find a way off the ship. Yunwu examined the locking mechanism. It was sophisticated, using technology he did not fully understand. But technology followed patterns, logic, physics. He worked quickly, trying different combinations on the control interface. More guards appeared behind them. These carried different weapons, projectile launchers of some kind. The guards fired. Small darts flew through the air. Yunji pushed Doyun aside as one passed where his head had been. Minhyo grabbed a fallen piece of equipment, using it as a shield. Yunwu kept working. His fingers flew across the alien controls. The logic was different, but not incomprehensible. Every system had vulnerabilities. Every code had patterns. The door began to open. Chixelara made a decision. She sealed the docking bay remotely. Let the humans reach it. Let them see their ships in the vast emptiness of space beyond. Then she would vent the atmosphere. They would die quickly, painlessly. It was more mercy than most specimens received. But as she reached for the control, Kravik stopped her. The old scientist placed a gentle tendril on her appendage. Do not. They are escaping. We must stop them. If we kill them, we prove ourselves monsters, and their people will never forgive us. Kravik gestured to the monitors. Look at them. They have shown restraint we did not expect. They could have killed every guard they encountered. They chose not to. These are not mindless predators. They are people trying to go home. Chixelara watched the humans enter the docking bay. They moved cautiously, expecting a trap. Smart, always so smart. They checked corners, covered each other, communicated with simple gestures that had become a complete language. The Taewon Dawn sat in the bay, damaged but intact. The humans ran toward it. Hope was visible on their faces now. The first strong emotion Chixelara had seen from them. They wanted to live. They wanted to go home. They were not fearless. They were afraid. They simply did not let fear control them. Doyun reached the ship first. He tried the access panel. Locked, of course. They had known it would not be easy. He turned to Hyunwoo, who was already examining the ship's external systems. Guards poured into the docking bay. Dozens of them carrying heavy weapons now. The humans were trapped between the ship and an overwhelming force. Chixelara activated the communication system. Her voice echoed through the bay. Humans, stop. We will not harm you. We will negotiate. Doyun looked up at the speakers. You captured us. Imprisoned us. Experimented on us. Why would we trust you now? Because, Chixelara said slowly, we understand now. You are not specimens. You are people. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Let us correct it. The humans formed a defensive circle backs to their ship. They were outnumbered 50-1. They had 2 stolen stunning weapons and determination. Against the Vrelith's technology, it should have been hopeless. But the guards did not advance. They waited, because orders had changed, because Chixelara had finally convinced command that these humans were different. Velthon appeared in the docking bay, unarmed, moving slowly with appendages raised in a gesture of peace. He carried a translation device. He activated it and placed it on the ground between the 2 groups. We offer negotiation, his translated voice said. We will repair your ship, provide supplies, grant you safe passage out of our territory. In exchange, we ask only that you leave peacefully. Doyun looked at his crew. Hyunwoo was calculating odds. Jisoo was checking everyone for injuries. Yoonji was watching the guards for any aggressive movement. Minhyo clutched his fungus samples, ready to weaponize them if needed. They were exhausted, scared, far from home. But they were alive, together, and still fighting. That was very human. Doyun stepped forward. How do we know you will honor this agreement? You do not, Velthon admitted. You must trust us, just as we must trust you not to share the location of our territory with your people. Mutual vulnerability. Mutual risk. Why the sudden change? Doyun asked. Why negotiate now instead of in the cells? Because you escaped. Chixelara's voice came through the speakers. Because you defeated our security without killing anyone. Because your people will come looking for you eventually, and we do not want to meet them as enemies. Because we finally understand what you are. And what is that? Doyen asked, a long pause. Then, survivors. From a world that taught you to overcome anything. We cannot break you. We cannot contain you. The Vrelith Empire had conquered 237 worlds. Their methods were perfect, tested across 3 centuries of expansion. They would arrive with overwhelming force, display their power, and watch as the primitive species below surrendered within hours. Fear was their greatest weapon, sharper than any blade, more powerful than any bomb. The research vessel Eternal Judgment drifted through the dark space between stars, its sensors scanning for new prey. Commander Kixelara stood in the control center, her 3 eyes reflecting the soft blue light of the displays. She had overseen 43 successful acquisitions. Today would be 44. Signal detected, announced her subordinate Velthon. Small vessel, primitive fusion drive. Approximately 250 life forms aboard. Kixelara felt satisfaction ripple through her sensory tendrils. Perfect. A small group meant easier processing, faster data collection. The species would be cataloged, tested, and assigned their place in the Empire's hierarchy. Most became laborers. Some became food. A rare few showed enough intelligence to serve as technicians. Disable their engines. Deploy the paralytic gas. Standard protocol, she commanded. The Eternal Judgment moved with predatory grace. The alien ship was massive compared to the human vessel, like a whale approaching a minnow. Energy beams lanced out, precise and controlled, cutting through the smaller ship's propulsion systems. The human vessel called the Taiwan Dawn shuddered and went dark. Inside the human ship, alarms screamed. Captain Doyen gripped his chair as the lights died. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red. Report, he shouted. Engines are gone, called out Yunji from the pilot station. Her hands flew across the controls, trying systems that no longer responded. Something just cut through our main drive like it was paper. Hyunwoo pulled up what remained of their sensors. His face went pale. Captain, there's a ship out there. It's enormous. I'm reading energy signatures I've never seen before. Before Doyen could respond, the vents began hissing. A sweet-smelling gas flooded into the bridge. Jisoo recognized the danger immediately. Hold your breath. But it was too late. The gas was already in their lungs, in their blood. Minyo stumbled and fell. Yunji slumped over her console. One by one, every human aboard the Taiwan Dawn collapsed into unconsciousness. Kixelara watched through her screens as the life signs on the human vessel all went dormant. Perfect efficiency. Her crew would now board, collect the specimens, and transport them to the holding cells. By the time they woke, they would be in an environment designed to break their spirits. Hours passed. The humans began to wake. Doyen opened his eyes to find himself in a cell made of something that looked like crystal. The walls glowed with a faint purple light. He could see through them into other cells, where his crew members were also stirring. The floor beneath him was smooth and cold. He stood slowly, checking himself for injuries. Nothing. He still wore his uniform. His fingers found his pulse, steady, normal. Whatever had knocked them out hadn't hurt them. That was almost worse. It meant their captors wanted them alive and healthy. In the next cell, Hyunwoo was already on his feet. The engineer approached the wall and placed his palm against it. An energy field hummed, pushing back against his touch. He pressed harder, testing its resistance. His eyes were calculating, measuring, analyzing. Jisoo sat up and immediately began checking the others she could see. She counted heads, looking for injuries or signs of distress. Her medical training took over even in captivity. She noted that everyone appeared unharmed. She also noted something else. None of them were screaming or panicking. Yunji was examining the cell from a different angle. She walked the perimeter, her eyes tracking upward to the ceiling, down to where the walls met the floor. She was mapping the space, looking for weaknesses, counting her steps, old habits from her pilot training. Minho pressed his face close to the transparent wall, looking beyond the cells. He could see movement, shadows that didn't move like humans. Their captors. He watched their patterns, how they walked, how they interacted with the technology around them. The Vrelith guards monitoring the cells noticed something unusual. The standard response to awakening in captivity was predictable across all species they had encountered. First came confusion, then fear, then either anger or despair. Some creatures threw themselves at the walls. Others curled into balls and refused to move. Many made sounds of distress. These humans did none of those things, Velthon reported to Kixelara. The specimens are awake, but their behavior is irregular. Kixelara came to see for herself. She watched as the human called Hyunwoo systematically tested different points along the energy barrier. She watched as the one called Jisoo performed what looked like exercises, keeping her body active. She watched as Yoonji drew marks on the wall using her own blood from a small cut on her finger. Marks that seemed to represent numbers or symbols. Perhaps they are in shock, suggested Velthon. Sometimes primitive species freeze when overwhelmed. But Kixelara had seen shock before. This was not shock. The humans moved with purpose. Their eyes were alert, focused. The one who seemed to be their leader, Doyen, was attempting to communicate. He spoke words they couldn't understand yet, but his tone was not pleading. It was firm, almost demanding. Activate the translation matrix, Kixelara ordered. I want to know what they are saying. The system took several minutes to process the human language, pulling from their ship's database. When it activated, Doyun's words came through clearly. We are civilians on a colony mission. We mean no harm. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. Kixelara felt a flutter of confusion. The human was making demands? After being captured by a vastly superior force? Where was the fear? Where was the submission? She activated the communication system. You are specimens of the Vralith Empire. You will be studied, catalogued, and assigned purpose. Cooperation will result in better treatment. Doyen looked directly at the sensor that served as a camera. His expression was calm. We are not specimens. We are people. Release us and we can discuss peaceful contact between our species. This response troubled Kixelara deeply. She had delivered that same speech to dozens of species. The proper response was immediate submission or futile anger. This human showed neither. He spoke as if he were in a position to negotiate. In the other cells, the remaining humans had heard the exchange through the translation system. Hyunwoo caught Doyen's eye through the transparent walls. He tapped his chest twice, then pointed to the energy barrier. A signal. Doyen gave the smallest nod in return. Message received and understood. Jisoo stretched deliberately, making sure the cameras saw her checking her physical condition. She wanted their captors to know she was healthy and strong. Intimidation worked both ways. Minho had stopped watching the guards. He was now watching the other aliens moving in the distance, smaller ones wearing different clothing. Scientists, perhaps. He committed every detail to memory. Yoonji finished her markings. 6 tallies on the wall. 6 guards had passed by in a pattern. Every 8 minutes, a new one appeared. Patterns meant routines. Routines meant predictability. Kixelara left the monitoring station feeling unsettled. In all her years of acquisition, she had never encountered a species that responded this way. Perhaps the humans were simply ignorant of their situation. Perhaps they didn't understand that resistance was pointless. Tomorrow the experiments would begin. Tomorrow the humans would learn fear, but deep in her sensory core, Kixelara felt something she rarely experienced. A tiny whisper of doubt. These humans looked at their captors not with the eyes of prey, but with the eyes of predators who were simply waiting for the right moment. The eternal judgment drifted on through space, carrying 247 humans who showed no fear. In the holding cells, Doyen sat down and closed his eyes, not to sleep but to think, to plan, to remember every detail of his training, his experience, his life on Earth. He and his crew had survived worse than this. Earth had tried to kill them in 1,000 different ways since birth. Storms, diseases, accidents, wars. Every human alive was descended from survivors of an incredibly hostile world. These aliens had no idea what they had captured. They thought humans were just another primitive species to be broken and controlled. They would learn differently. Doyen would make certain of that. The Taewon Dawn glided through space on newly repaired engines. The ship hummed with proper life support, full fuel reserves and enough supplies to reach the nearest human outpost. The Vralith had kept their word. Every system had been restored, sometimes better than before. In the medical bay, Jisoo conducted final examinations of the crew. 247 people all accounted for. Minor injuries from the escape. Some psychological stress. But everyone was alive and whole. She logged each examination carefully, documenting everything that had happened. Captain Doyen sat in his chair on the bridge, staring at the stars ahead. Yoonji piloted them away from Vralith space at a steady pace, not too fast, not challenging their hosts. Hyunwoo monitored all systems obsessively, still not quite trusting the alien repairs despite their quality. Minho had returned to the hydroponics bay, checking on plants that had somehow survived their ordeal. Behind them, the Eternal Judgment followed at a distance. Not threatening, just ensuring the humans actually left their territory. It would follow them to the border, then turn back. A mutual assurance, Doyen received an incoming transmission. Kixlara's image appeared on the screen. The alien looked tired. Doyen understood that feeling. "We are approaching the boundary of our space," Kixlara said through the translation device. "Beyond that marker, you will be outside Vralith territory. We ask that you honor your agreement not to share our location with your authorities." "We will honor it," Doyen confirmed. "We will report this as an encounter with an unknown species that ended peacefully after initial misunderstandings. No coordinates, no detailed descriptions, no reasons for anyone to come looking for you." Kixlara's tendrils moved in what might have been gratitude. "Before you leave our space, I must ask the question that has troubled me since you arrived. How do your people live without fear?" Doyen was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. He wanted to give this alien researcher the truth. Not the terrifying version where humans were unstoppable death-world predators, but the real truth. "We don't live without fear," he said finally. "We have so much fear. Every human alive carries fears. We fear death, pain, loss, failure. We fear for our families, our friends, our future. Fear is always with us." "Then how do you function?" Kixlara asked. "How do you think clearly when fear should paralyze you?" "Because fear is information," Doyen explained. "It tells us something is dangerous. Our bodies prepare us to fight or run. Our minds become alert. Fear is not our enemy. It is a tool that helped our ancestors survive. We learn to listen to fear without being controlled by it." He leaned forward, wanting her to understand. "Your people seem to have evolved on a safer world. When you feel fear, you have no experience overcoming it, so it overwhelms you. But humans, every single human alive is descended from people who were afraid and did the hard thing anyway. We are not brave. We are just practiced." Kixlara processed this. "You choose to act despite fear. Always," Doyen said. "Every parent who protects their child despite danger. Every doctor who treats disease despite risk of infection. Every explorer who ventures into the unknown despite uncertainty. Every person who gets up each morning, despite not knowing what the day will bring. All of it requires acting while afraid." "Your world taught you this," Kixlara said quietly. "Yes. Earth tried to kill us in every possible way. Storms, earthquakes, predators, diseases, hunger, cold, heat. Every generation faced challenges that should have destroyed us. But every generation survived. We adapted. We learned. We grew stronger. Not physically stronger. Psychologically stronger." Doyen glanced at his crew on the bridge. "We are not special. We are not superior. We are just the product of our environment. If your people had evolved on a world like ours, you would be the same. If we had evolved on a world like yours, we would be as frightened as you are now." "I think," Kixlara said slowly, "that is the kindest thing you could have said. You do not claim superiority. You recognize circumstance. We are all products of our worlds," Doyen agreed. "There is no shame in that." The transmission ended. The Taewon Dawn crossed the border marker. Behind them, the Eternal Judgment turned and headed back into Vralith space. The two species parted ways, likely never to meet again. In his cabin, Hyunwoo wrote a detailed technical report on everything he had learned about Vralith technology. Not to weaponize it, not to exploit it, but because he was an engineer, and understanding how things worked was his nature. The report would go into sealed files, classified, available only if humans ever encountered the Vralith again. Jisoo wrote a medical report on Vralith physiology, their fragility, their slower reactions, their sensitivity to certain compounds, but she included notes about their compassion, their willingness to negotiate, their choice to let the humans go. Context mattered in medical records. Yoonji filed a navigation report that carefully excluded any useful coordinates. The route they had taken, the stars they had passed, the location of the encounter, all deliberately vague. She kept her promise. Minho returned to his plants with a small sample of the fungus that had helped them escape. He would study it, catalog it, understand it, but the records would note only that it was from an unknown region of space. No one would be able to trace it back to Vralith territory. And Doyen wrote the captain's log. the official record of what had happened. He described the capture honestly, the experiments without consent, the imprisonment, but he also described the negotiation, the peaceful resolution, the respectful parting. His log would satisfy Earth's authorities without giving them reason to seek revenge. Days passed. The crew settled into their routines. Children played in the recreation areas. Scientists returned to their research. Engineers tinkered with systems. Life aboard the Taiwan Dawn returned to normal, as much as it could after such an experience. But everyone who had been in those cells remembered. They remembered being treated as specimens. They remembered learning to communicate through gestures. They remembered working together to escape. They remembered choosing mercy when revenge would have been easier. One evening, the crew gathered in the main hall. Someone suggested they talk about what happened, process it together as a community. The conversation began hesitantly. Were we right to let them go? Someone asked. They kidnapped us, experimented on us. Should we have just forgiven that? We didn't forgive, Jisoo said quietly. We chose not to seek revenge. Those are different things. Forgiveness might come later, or it might never come. But revenge would have made us like them, treating others as less than people. They learned, Yoonji added. By the end, they saw us as people. Isn't that what we wanted? To be recognized as equals? I was terrified the whole time, admitted Minho. I kept thinking we were going to die. But I couldn't show it. If I broke down, everyone else might have too. So I focused on the science, on learning, on finding solutions, acting brave even when I was scared. Others shared similar feelings. The facade of fearlessness had been just that, a facade. But by maintaining it together, they had supported each other. No one had to be strong alone because they were strong as a group. Hyunwoo stood up. I want to say something. We survived because we worked together. Every person contributed. Yoon kept us organized. Jisoo kept us healthy and aware. Yoonji mapped our escape route. Minho found our weapon. I figured out the technology, but none of us could have done it alone. That is what being human means. We are pack animals. We are strongest together. The room fell silent. Then someone started clapping. Others joined. It spread through the hall until everyone was applauding, not for any individual heroism, but for their collective survival. For being human. Months later, the Taiwan Dawn reached human space. They transmitted their arrival codes and were greeted by a patrol ship. Questions came immediately. Where had they been? Why so long? What happened? Doyen provided the official report. An encounter with unknown aliens. Initial misunderstanding. Peaceful resolution. No coordinates because they wanted to respect the aliens' privacy. No need for military intervention because no ongoing threat existed. The authorities were suspicious but had no grounds to push harder. The crew's stories matched. The evidence was consistent. And ultimately, everyone had survived. The Taiwan Dawn was cleared to continue to their colony destination. As they traveled onward, Doyen thought about Kixlara's question. How do humans live without fear? He realized now that the alien had asked the wrong question. The real question was not how humans lived without fear, but how they lived with it. Fear had been humanity's companion since the beginning. It had warned them of predators, motivated them to build shelters, driven them to create tools and weapons and medicine. Fear had shaped human civilization, but humans had shaped their relationship with fear in return. They had learned to feel fear and act anyway. To acknowledge danger and face it. To be terrified and still choose hope. That was the human gift, earned through countless generations on a world that showed no mercy. The Taiwan Dawn eventually reached its destination, a new world gentler than Earth, ready for colonization. The crew disembarked, began building their new home. Children who had been prisoners would grow up under alien stars, telling stories about the time they were captured by aliens and escaped. The testing chamber was designed to break spirits. Kixlara had perfected it over decades. The walls could display any environment, any horror, any nightmare. The floor could heat or freeze. The air could carry sense of death or decay. Every species had its weakness, and this room found them all. Doyen was the first human brought in. 2 guards escorted him, their weapons ready but not aimed. They strapped him into a chair that adjusted to his body shape. Restraints locked around his wrists and ankles. A helmet lowered onto his head, covering his eyes with a screen. Kixlara watched from behind protective glass. Velthon operated the controls. They would start with the standard fear protocol. First, show the subject their homeworld, then destroy it in front of their eyes. The emotional trauma usually broke even the strongest specimens within minutes. The helmet activated. Doyen saw Earth floating in space, blue and beautiful. He recognized the continents, the swirl of clouds, the oceans. For a moment, his heart ached with homesickness. Then he remembered where he was and why he was seeing this. The image changed. A massive weapon appeared, pointing at Earth. Energy gathered at its tip, bright and terrible. Then it fired. The beam struck Earth's surface. Continents shattered. Oceans boiled away. The planet cracked apart like an egg, pieces spinning away into the void. Kixlara leaned forward, waiting for the screams, the tears, the begging. Doyen watched the simulation end. Then he spoke. That's not how planetary destruction would actually work. The physics are wrong. If you hit a planet with that much energy, the debris field would be much larger. Also, the beam's color suggests plasma, but plasma would disperse in vacuum. You should use kinetic impactors instead. Much more realistic. Silence filled the observation room. Velthon checked his instruments. The human's heart rate increased slightly during the simulation, but it has already returned to normal. Stress hormones are elevated but not in the expected range. He appears to be analyzing the visual data rather than experiencing emotional distress. Kixlara felt her tendrils twitch with frustration. Increase the intensity. Show him his crew members dying. The simulation changed. Now Doyen saw Hyunwoo, Jisoo, Yunji, and Minho in separate chambers. One by one they were killed in various horrible ways. The images were graphic, detailed, designed to cause maximum trauma. Doyen closed his eyes inside the helmet. I know they're not real. My crew is alive. I can tell this is a simulation because the rendering quality drops when you try to show complex organic damage. Your graphics engine can't handle real-time biological destruction modeling. It's clever, though. Almost had me worried for a second. Kixlara made a sharp gesture. The guards removed Doyen and brought in Minho next. The young botanist sat in the chair without resistance. They strapped him in and activated a different protocol. This one used physical pain, electric shocks, heat, cold pressure. The system would gradually increase intensity until the subject begged for mercy. The shocks began. Mild at first, then stronger. Minho's muscles tensed. His jaw clenched. Sweat formed on his forehead. But he didn't scream. Instead, he started talking. Interesting. The current is alternating, probably around 60 hertz. The voltage feels like maybe 50 volts. Pain receptors in my hands are firing first, then spreading up my arms. The sensation is sharp, not burning, so you're keeping it below the threshold for tissue damage. Smart. You want data, not dead subjects. Velthon looked at Kixlara in confusion. He is describing his own torture as if it were a scientific experiment. They increased the intensity. Minho gasped, his body jerking against the restraints. But between shocks, he continued his analysis. Okay, that was stronger. Maybe 100 volts? My heart is racing now. You should be careful. Human cardiac tissue can go into fibrillation if you push too hard. I'd recommend staying under 150 volts unless you want to kill me. Kixlara stopped the test. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. The pain protocol had broken trained warriors from warrior species. This human, a scientist who studied plants, was treating it like a learning opportunity. Jisoo was next. They tried isolation. The chamber went completely dark and silent. No light, no sound, no stimulus at all. Most species began to hallucinate within an hour. Many went insane within a day. They left Jisoo in the darkness for 6 hours. When they brought her out, she was sitting in a meditation pose, breathing slowly and evenly. Her eyes opened as the lights came on. She blinked, adjusted to the brightness, and smiled slightly. Thank you. I haven't had a chance to properly meditate in weeks. The colony ship was always too noisy. That was actually quite refreshing. The Vralith scientist held an emergency meeting. Kixlara stood before a holographic display showing all their test results. Every graph, every measurement, every response pattern was wrong. These humans possess no instinctive submission response, she explained. The fear protocols that work on all other species have minimal effect. They analyze threats instead of fleeing from them. They find ways to cope with pain and isolation that should be impossible for such primitive creatures. Kravix, an older scientist with many years of experience, made a gesture of concern. I have heard stories from the ancient texts. Warnings about certain types of worlds, death worlds where the environment itself is hostile to life. The creatures that evolve on such worlds develop unusual psychological traits. They must or they die. You think these humans come from such a world? Asked Velthon. I think we should examine their database more carefully before continuing, Kravix replied. Back in the holding cells, Hyunwoo had been working. During his time in the testing chamber, he had felt the energy field that made up the restraints. It was similar to the fields in their cells. He now understood its frequency and its weak points. Yoonji had counted 17 different guard rotations. She knew exactly when each shift changed, which guards were more alert, which ones seemed bored. She had memorized the layout of every corridor she had been taken through. Jisoo had been carefully observing the aliens themselves. She noticed they moved slowly, deliberately. Their reaction time seemed poor compared to humans. They treated the slightest injury with extreme concern, as if any wound might be fatal. They were fragile, she realized. Much more fragile than humans. Minho had made the most interesting discovery. During his transport back to his cell, he had passed by what looked like a small ecosystem, plants growing under artificial light. Some were alien, but others looked almost familiar. He had managed to grab a tiny sample, hiding it in his palm. Now he examined it in his cell. It was a fungus of some kind, and it smelled like it produced spores. Doyen brought them all together using hand signals through the transparent walls. They had developed a simple code during their captivity. Taps, gestures, facial expressions. The guards didn't understand it, didn't even realize the humans were communicating. The message was clear. They were gathering information, learning about their captors, finding weaknesses, and when the time was right, they would act. That night, Kixelara couldn't rest. She sat in her chamber reviewing the data over and over. The humans showed elevated stress responses, yes. Their bodies reacted to pain, to fear, to threat. But their minds remained clear. They processed their fear instead of being controlled by it. She accessed the human database. She began reading their history files. What she found made her sensory tendrils go rigid with horror. Earth, a world where the weather could kill, where the ground shook and split open, where tiny organisms caused plagues that destroyed civilizations, where predators hunted humans and humans hunted each other. A world of ice ages and heat waves, floods and droughts, volcanic eruptions and meteor strikes, and the humans had not just survived. They had thrived. They had turned their world's hostility into a strength. They had learned to adapt to anything, endure anything, overcome anything. Kixelara read about human wars, conflicts that lasted years, decades, even centuries, weapons that could level cities, tactics that showed terrifying creativity and ruthlessness. She read about human survival stories, people who had endured months in hostile environments, who had recovered from injuries that would kill any Vralith, who had faced certain death and found ways to live. Most disturbing of all, she read about human entertainment. They created stories and images designed to frighten themselves. They called it horror. They enjoyed it. They sought it out deliberately. The concept was incomprehensible. Why would any species voluntarily experience fear, unless fear meant something different to them? Unless fear was not a force that paralyzed them, but one that motivated them. Kixelara sent an urgent message to the Command Council. Request permission to halt experimentation on human subjects. Recommend immediate consultation with historical xenobiology experts. Potential death world species encountered. The response came back quickly. Permission denied. Continue experiments. Command wants full data before making classification decisions. Kixelara felt something she had not experienced in many years. Fear. Real, genuine fear. Not of what the humans might do now, while imprisoned and powerless, but of what they might become if they were ever given the chance to act. In his cell, Doyen lay on the floor and looked up at the glowing ceiling. He thought about his crew, his mission, his home.